This second series of scores includes more modern works, Debussy, Dukas, and Holst, and it also takes a look at the score that really started the whole revolution in great orchestration. But first, let's start with one of my favorite scores by Prokofiev. I'm going to take a slight risk here in this particular selection, the suite from Lieutenant Kije. It's not available on IMSLP, even though I do believe it is public domain because there is a Dover score of it in this collection of 4 orchestral works. However, it's worth it to go to your library or to even just buy that Dover edition and check out this piece because it is really an excellent piece of orchestration. In the first place, it's really straightforward what Prokofiev does, although you have to get used to this strange little quirk he has of putting the horns between the trumpets and the trombones, sort of putting them in order of pitch in the score rather than putting them up next to the wind. So you just have to watch out for that. But there are some such neat things about this score. I mean, for instance, his use of the cornet, and also his use of saxophone as solo. It's just amazing. It's beautiful, magical writing. And even though it's straightforward, what Prokofiev is straightforward about, and the ideas that he has just remarkable. They're effective. They're things that I think up to that time no other orchestrator had really imagined would work. And Prokofiev just saw it and did it. That's one of the great things about Prokofiev as an orchestrator and a composer. It's just really worth checking out, I would say, worth the extra hassle. This list wouldn't be complete without Debussy's Prelude to the Afternoon of a Faun. This is really Debussy's first significant work for orchestra, and it is just like the Prokofiev I mentioned before. It is a unique work of orchestration filled with ideas that only that composer could come up with. It's just amazing how he uses the different elements of melody and harmony together, and the way that he escapes from the strange bind that composers were in at the time, of having extremely restrictive form on one side and extremely hysterical over-the-top orchestration, the Wagnerian school on the other. And sort of between those two poles, a lot of very bad composing, or a lot of very forgettable composing was happening during that time. And really just there didn't seem to be any way forward for the French composer until Debussy just basically sidestepped all that stuff and came up with his own ideas. So, originality of the score aside, it's filled with great ideas, it's filled with unforgettable melodies, and also what's remarkable about this is what it doesn't say, what it just suggests, and what appears in your mind and appears to your ear that isn't even in the score. Debussy's orchestration represents the beginning of a certain outlook on orchestration, especially for the French school. This piece by Dukas, the Sorcerer's Apprentice, kind of represents almost the penultimate way of thinking about that type of orchestration. Of course, it's got bits of sort of older romantic ideas in it. And in terms of form, it's just perfect, like a movement of a classical symphony. But at the same time, it is a programmatic work. It is describing the activity that happens in that famous poem by Goethe, The Sorcerer's Apprentice. And of course, people probably remember this from Fantasia. But when you just really look at the score and you see what Dukas is doing, it's amazing. It's amazing how each instrument speaks individually. It's amazing how the groups work together to just create very, very pastel-like ideas and colors, harking back to Debussy's approach. And it's also amazing just the force and the vitality that he's able to evolve through his phrasing. It's just top-notch orchestration, and like so many other scores of this period, most orchestrators of today owe a lot to this composer and his work. Speaking of composers whose scores are owed a great debt by today's composers, especially of film, Holst planets are really, at the top of the mark. I've been using Holst's planets for examples in other parts of my series on orchestration, and it's just really amazing because I always find out new things when I read his scores. And yet what makes this good for a beginning score reader is the fact that it is so blunt, it is so plain. His ideas at the root are actually very simple, probably because this was originally a 2-piano score and then Holst orchestrated it. Holst was so individual in his orchestral coloring. He was so dynamic and confident in the way that he developed his ideas. Everybody has an immediate emotional reaction to each of the movements of this piece. Well, it is really worth it for you to download the score and to study each page, because every page will teach you something new and have relevance for today's type of orchestration, especially if you're doing film orchestration, especially if you're a young composer and you're into very bombastic scoring. You cannot do without studying this piece and studying it closely.